Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
And a very good morning to you. This is Newsline, live as always from the Newsfirst studios in Dawson Street in Colombo. And joining us this morning to discuss a matter that is capturing the minds and I suppose the hearts of the people, the bond issue, the ongoing Presidential Commission inquiry into the bond issue, is Professor Rajiva Vijayasinghe, that wonderful political commentator and author. Very good morning to you, Professor.
Morning for us.
And nice to see you.
Nice to be back after a long time.
Yes, indeed. You've been, where have you been?
Well, I've been travelling.
Ah, there you are.
But I always come when you invite me. Yes, I was in Andhra and Telangana last week, which was delightful.
And how's the politics there? They split the state into two.
They split the state. The Chief Minister of Telangana seems to be going to temples every day and handing over the state's wealth to temples.
Right.
But
it's better than handing it to himself.
Exactly. No, it's all very strange. But the place is developing, and I'm afraid, coming back here, it's rather sad that there's no development at all at the moment.
Well, how can there be when all this money is being sort of spirited away? Now then, we've got here the lady. This is the image that we've been waiting to see because we hadn't seen her. There's no sort of images available of this lady. And that is the former superintendent of the Public Debt Department, Mrs. Deepa Seniviratne. This, let us remind you, is the lady who stood up to former Governor Arjuna Mahendran when he wanted to take 20 billion rupees instead of the advertised 1 billion. He wanted to do 20 billion, and she said no. She actually said no to the governor of the central bank, perhaps placing at risk her own position within the bank. Eventually, the 20 billion became 10 billion. He wanted it taken up at 10 billion. Now, yesterday, Professor Vijayasinghe, Mrs. Seniviratne gave evidence at the Presidential Commission of Inquiry, and she also confirmed that Governor Mahendran had been at the dealing room where the auction was taking place. Before that, we had Dr. Azad, who came there on giving evidence, and he too said the same thing. And Governor Indrajit Kumar Swamy, giving his evidence earlier, said that when he was asked questions related to the dealing room, he was unable to really answer some of them, and he said so. And he said that, and he said, well, I can't because I haven't actually been there myself, but I can answer by conferring with my officials. What does this indicate? We have Governor Mahendran who's constantly maintained, pleaded that he's never been there. And now we have all these people under oath telling us that, in fact, he was there.
Well, essentially, he's all old hat to those of us who were on the court 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Because Mrs. Seniviratne, admirable woman, and I wrote so at the time, actually made all this very clear to us. And in fact, I asked her, I was quite harsh, I said, they told us they had told him not to take 20.
Yeah.
And we said, well, why didn't you tell them not to take 10? And she almost cried and said, we told him repeatedly. And to me, Faraz, it is very clear that Arjuna Mahendran is the most slimy crook imaginable. He's an absolute disgrace to both his father and his university. But the question goes deeper. The question goes as to why he was protected. And I think
that's right. That's a very important point.
He was protected by the Prime Minister, and I'm sorry to say it is very clear from all this that the Prime Minister is also a slimy crook and a disgrace to his family and his, let me say, his most admirable grandparents. And indeed, I don't think even his father would have behaved like this. But to actually make so much money and then precipitate a national crisis by getting his foreign friends to persuade the President to dissolve Parliament because the report was due. And that is where I think the President also must now start thinking seriously of the crime he allowed to be perpetrated for another 2 years.
Yeah.
by dissolving Parliament under pressure. In this very room, we were told by people very close to him that he had pledged not to dissolve. Nimal Siripala told me he had agreed not to dissolve. And then he was bullied. Apparently he met a few foreign envoys. And I have asked, did they know how dishonest this was? It is absolutely disgraceful. It is very sad that all this is emerging only now. And I think President Sirisena must think seriously about how he, a decent man, who I believe has no allegations of personal corruption against him, is now presiding over the most, let's say, I should say manipulatively crooked government that this country has ever had. And it is time he made amends to the country for the great mistake he made in August, or rather June, and then August 2015. I have written about it in my piece in Ceylon today. You know, it's the culmination of the piece I called Endgame. And this extension of corruption. You know, Deepa and Dr. Azad, very intelligent man, they both answered absolutely honestly and decently to court, and all that was suppressed.
And
you know,
and thanks to and the thanks that Mrs. Seneviratne received for her independent stance on this was, of course, that she was transferred out to the public debt department.
Well, there was a witch hunt immediately after the election. Lots of people were transferred out. Some of them rang me and told me how badly they were treated. Nothing was done about this, and the President must take on responsibility now, even if it's 18 months later, and take remedial action. There should be an inquiry into what happened to all these very decent people. And as far as I could see, there was only one person in the central bank who was determined to defend Mahendran. That was Dr. Samrasiri. But even he actually admitted in his evidence about the irregularities. Those details I can't quite remember now, but he did say that it was unprecedented, some of the things that Mahendran had done. And you know, the very fact that this guy lied to us, you know, claimed that he had monetary board approval, all rubbish. What is even worse, and I think the President should actually apologize to Nivad Kabra for the efforts to throw mud on him. You know, for 2 years, since the election, they have been trying to find evidence about Nivad. They have found nothing. We know perfectly well.
The FCID said that they're busy.
Well, since they were told to get him at any cost, he was questioned repeatedly, as you know, and he has an absolutely clean slate. There were efforts to say that he gave perpetual treasuries bonds. He actually revealed the whole list of bonds. Perpetual treasuries got hardly any bonds under his tenure. They tried to say his sister was on the board. Nivad Kabra is a man of great integrity. I'm glad at least that some part of people with whom I have connections, unlike the Prime Minister, understand the word integrity.
Now then...
because clearly the Prime Minister was behind Mahendran. He stood up in the House and lied to us. And why isn't the President taking action against the Prime Minister? That is what I don't understand.
Yes, but now if we can examine the role of the Governor, Mahendran, at the time, you know, as the Minister in charge of the subject, Ranil Wickremesinghe would have suggested that as he said in Parliament, that he wanted the way the bonds were awarded to be changed. That's all well and good, because he is the Minister in charge, and so he can make his suggestion. But it wasn't an order, and wouldn't it have been incumbent on the Governor to then go to the Monetary Board and seek their approval, and then implement whatever recommendations the Monetary Board made?
Well, there are two questions. One is changing the method, and you're perfectly right, going for full-scale auctions is a method that, let us say, is not dishonest, it's foolish. Eran Wickremesinghe, whom I have that regard, had always advocated that what he called direct placements were inappropriate, said it distorted the market. But Dr. Vijayawardene said that all central banks around the world use a mixed system, because if you go only by auction, naturally the dealers want higher interest, so they bump interest up. But at least that's transparent. Now,
but in a small market, it can be. They can fix it.
Well, let us put it this way. it is not absolutely wrong, though I think it's unwise for reasons Dr. Vijayawardena has explained, which is why Governor A.S. Jayawardena and then followed by Cabral, who extended the practice, got it approved by the Monetary Board on rational arguments.
Right.
As you said, that was not done this time. The minutes we got showed that Archer Mahendran was drawing red herrings all the time.
Yeah.
In fact, the previous Monetary Board had said keep interest low.
Yes.
Whereas,
and they agreed to keep it low.
And then this guy acted arbitrarily in a way that raised interest.
Indeed, and
but the second question is this. You see, even if you follow that approach, you do it directly. So if you say do it 100% by auction, then you advertise X by auction and you take X. Now, if the Prime Minister was telling Arjuna, engage in subterfuge, advertise 1 billion and take 10, when only few people will suspect, if you're not given direct information, that you will take 10 or 20, then the Prime Minister would have been engaging in sleight of hand inappropriate. But I think what the Prime Minister's defenders say is, no, he meant do an auction 100%. But then if that was the case, why the minute Archer Mahendran did this fraud, advertising 1 and asking for 10. Why did the Prime Minister continue to defend him? Why did the Prime Minister pressurize the President to dissolve Parliament? It is very, very clear that he also was a beneficiary of this theft. And this theft not only led to enormous amounts of money going into the coffers of perpetual treasuries and therefore, as we all know, helping the UNP's election campaign, but secondly, it bumped up interest rates for the next year. And as you know, the same thing was done again the following year. So one of the reasons we are paying this massive amount of debt servicing is because of this wicked action done because Ranil Wickremesinghe, in the way of stealing, is to say, I am honest, I didn't do anything wrong, and I don't take money for myself. I believe that. But this dishonesty is corrosive. And President Sirisena must act now that this evidence is there.
Well, yes, but the Presidential Commission is ongoing, of course, and so we must place our faith in this system now. But of course, it is frustrating, and it's frustrating to know that we've had one of the most senior officials in the country, in the form of the Governor of the Central Bank, who's obviously misled, and for want of another word, and judging by the evidence presented under oath to this Presidential Commission of Inquiry and to 2 core committees, that Mr. Mahendran lied. Now, if we want to be quaint with the English language, we can say that he was economical with the facts.
He lied.
He lied.
And you know what is very sad is that, I have known now for Vimal Veeramsa, I was told he was one of the people most critical of me under the last government. But there is this guy, supposedly for misusing vehicles, in custody. And Arjun Mahendran, who deprived the country of billions, is walking the streets free. What justice is there? Why is the FCID not dealing with him?
But then what is his role? You know, you've been in government. Can you explain this to me? He's accompanying, or he has accompanied, various delegations, or he's been part of this delegation that went to wherever it was, Singapore, Indonesia, wherever it is. The details escape me at this moment. But he's been on these official visits abroad. Now, he can't possibly be, a member of the public who just happened to be there and who's been within this entourage. So what's the standing of this person?
He's another of the Wickremesinghe acolytes. There are still only about 6 of them left who actually have not realized. Even his relations have started to say the man doesn't listen to anybody. And these are people who are solid UNP people. But there are about 6 of them left: Malik Samarakrama, Sagala Ratnayaka, Arjuna Mahendran, Akhila Viraj Karyavasa. And it is time the President dealt with this mafia.
You said it so quickly that I missed them. Say that again.
Malik Samarakrama,
1.
Sagala Ratnayaka,
2.
Arjuna Mahendran,
3.
And Akhila Viraj Karyavasa.
4.
I don't remember who the others are. Ravi, I think, is playing his own game. Because he
leave it
very shrewd man.
But now then, what I want to ask you is this. The people who have been loyal UNPs, who, you cut them up and their blood will be green, and they're loyal to the core, surely they are now all realizing that Mr. Wickremesinghe's sort of dilly-dallying, flirting around this Mahendran issue in the face of overwhelming evidence.
He's not floating around it, he's backing the crook to the hill.
Right. Well, you know, you're putting it very well there. But surely, isn't it time that Mr. Wickremesinghe departs from the leadership of the UNP? Because the UNP is a party of suffering because of these directions. I mean, he's led them to over 24 electoral defeats and so on. But nevertheless, they've been behind him. Isn't it time that he was
well,
pushed
A,
down?
he's a brilliant maneuverer. B, he has this capacity to fool others. So, you know, Mahinda Rajapaksa actually kept him at the top of the UNP.
Yeah.
Thinking that with him at the top of the UNP there was no danger of any defeat.
Yeah.
Mahinda was extraordinarily foolish on this because he should have actually realized that Ranil is a vindictive creature.
Yeah.
And
Is he?
therefore, of course, I told you what the Sheriff Commissioner told me. He was like that elephant who, you know, took his revenge at the very end.
Right.
He never forgets, but it's also very petty.
Right.
Because he's quite capable of, you know, using people like Chandrika Kumaratunga, who was his great enemy in the past.
Yeah.
But, so Ranil succeeded, and of course there was ineffable folly in the people in the UNP who should have challenged him.
Yeah.
Because they all kept delaying and dilly-dallying.
Yeah.
And he managed to create dissension between Sajid and Kavijaya Surya.
Yeah.
But I think the real tragedy is that if President Sirisena had the courage to make a change now,
Yeah.
he would triumph. His problem, there's an excellent article in today's Mirror by Rangajaya Surya which reflects what I have said in Ceylon today, in my article today, that the president is a prisoner of his own fears. And we didn't elect him president to be crushed by fears.
I want you
He's
to...
so frightened
Yeah.
of Mahinda Rajapaksa,
Yeah.
and that fear, as Ranga also suggests, is exacerbated by those people who didn't support Sirisena at the start but jumped over.
Yeah.
And they have to present their loyalty. They
yeah.
continue to frighten him about Mahinda,
Yeah.
and some of Mahinda's people are also frightening the president by saying foolish things. And the result is
But
he's
can
more
we-
frightened of Mahinda than of Ranil, even though Ranil is damaged the country.
But
as
don't-
Pfizer told me today, I had always told him that of the two, it is Ranil who is the greater danger, both to Sirisena and to the country. And it's time he realized this.
No, but if we can go back to this issue of why should the United National Party continue to be led by Mr. Wickremesinghe when, you know, he clearly this bond matter has cost the party dearly. The bond matter is not some urban sort of darling of the urban masses. The bond matter is known throughout the country. They may not know the intricacies of the bond, and there are really not so many intricacies, but they always know, they talk of it in terms of a Mahabankwe Horokamak. You know, so there's some fraud that's gone on. And this is clearly one of the most devastating things to hammer at the UNP. Isn't it time? Do you think that there is anybody who will muster enough courage and support to actually challenge Mr. Wickremesinghe's role as the leader of the UNP?
No, because the simple reason in Sri Lankan politics, there is so much power to the person in charge, and the UNP constitution, as you know, has entrenched him again.
Yeah.
There was a change, asking for a change every year, that no one will challenge him. You have to remember that, you know, when President Rajapaksa, who was much less nasty than Ranil Wickremesinghe in terms of the damage to the country.
Yeah.
You remember a lot of the people who are now critical about him said not a word. It was only people like Vasant Sennak and me and some people from the other parties like Dugunasekara who actually questioned him.
Yeah.
You know, some of us did it openly in writing. Others didn't. The present lot who now attack him rather crudely and nastily, and that's what I find regrettable, were like mice. If you remember, even the president told the parliamentary group, he didn't tell us, that the SLFP had to absolutely back the impeachment of Shirani Bandaranaike. So there is a certain level of, if you like, you know, kowtowing to the top.
Yeah.
And there are very few of us. Maybe that's why we have failed. who actually asked questions. You'll never have questions now until the president acts in the interests of the country. But if the president appoints a new prime minister tomorrow, I think people will fall behind him.
Where were you? How did you vote in terms of the removal of Siraj?
I didn't vote.
You didn't?
Of course I didn't.
Right.
I wanted to vote against, but some people in the SLFP, some young people who are very bright and capable, came and said, go away, because there are people who want to attack you. I was the only one in the House. And then I looked around for the people who had agreed with me not to vote, like Duganaseka. And they had also left.
Right.
So I didn't stay.
Right.
But of course I didn't vote, and I wrote about it. I wrote to the president and told him beforehand. I'm one person who puts things down on paper.
Right.
Just as I think, the only person who wrote to him in October and said, we cannot support you in the presidential election unless there are reforms.
Now,
but there are very few people like me, and that is presumably why I'm such a failure
some
in politics.
Some of our listeners are asking us, what do you think, what is the effect of this Presidential Commission inquiry? Now, they've finished they've been given a 3-month time limit, if you like. Let's say that they do keep to that 3 months and don't seek an extension. What next?
Well, my worry is that we'll have the same sort of sleight of hand by Ranil Wickremesinghe as he engaged in June.
How can he do this?
Well, he has his foreign friends. Don't forget that President Sirisena was, bamboozled into having an election early, having promised not to have one, because he was sort of told, there'll be disaster in Geneva if you don't immediately dissolve Parliament. I've mentioned that in my article today in Ceylon Today. And he panicked. Now, President Sirisena has got to realize that if he kowtows to Ranil and the people who don't really like this country,
here with this?
Well, they might try to, precipitate some sort of change at the top and stop this being enacted. I don't know, anything can happen, because none of us expected after President Sirisena's solemn promise not to dissolve till electoral reform came through. We never imagined he would break that promise. And his staff told me that he was bullied into it.
But, the evidence that is now being heard is absolutely devastating to Mr. Mahendran and his decision to convert 1 into 10 and so on. We have the Auditor General's report, and I suppose the Auditor General might come and might be asked to give evidence. We don't know. But it appears that all this evidence, one after another, is sealing what everyone sort of believed at the beginning anyway, that there was a real conflict of interest scenario there. And apart from that, of course, that Mr. Mahendran appeared to have gone on some solo adventure, which turned out to be a misadventure. The country's having to pay.
Well, it wasn't solo adventure, because as he said, the Prime Minister told him to do this, and the Prime Minister defended
him. Did he say that in court while you were there?
Yeah. Said it was all there in the evidence, if you read the stuff I wrote at the time.
Yeah.
Because, you see, it was confidential.
Yeah.
But then, under pressure from Ranil, Sujeet Senasinghe brought a case to prevent anything being published.
Yes.
And we tabled all the reports in court, so therefore they became public property.
I see.
So the proceedings of the original court, and indeed the draft report that was prepared, which was prevented, all make this very clear.
And was that really silly and utterly partisan for people like Sujiva and so on, and all these others who, in the second round, insisted on the footnotes, the footnotes?
Well, they were under instructions, and I'm sorry, because Sujiva in private told me that he knew what had happened. He said it wasn't Ravi, it came from higher up.
Right.
So he knew. And Sujiva is basically a decent guy, but I think he and Rosie were actually called in. We were told by another UNP person, they were called in by Ranil and said, stop this at any cost. Well, the only person in the UNP who behaved with great absolute integrity was Ranil Wickremesinghe. And look where he is now. I mean, he should be running the finances of the country. He should be finance minister, because everyone has absolute faith in his integrity. But what do we have? We have a system that has completely eroded confidence, and because these people also attacked China, which had done so much to help us when we started, the Chinese are never going to forgive. They may come in and help, but they will screw the country for everything that they can commercially.
So do you
Unlike
think
in the old days when we actually got a lot of concessions from China, and I don't blame China. The way they were treated in 2015 was an absolute disgrace and shows the total amateurishness of this bunch of crooks.
And Professor, what about there's a feeling, and I heard Dr. Razin Salih from the IPS say this on a program that I was watching the other day. He was saying that people like Dr. Iran Wickramaratne had not been given their due position.
Obviously. You see, what Ranil did immediately after the election was he sidelined all those who had actually been instrumental in ensuring he didn't stand. Because the sycophants, this bunch of crooks and thugs, kept telling him, if you stood, you would have won. Why did you let that man come? So the people who had actually been instrumental, I've written about it, in making sure he actually withdrew, were immediately sidelined. And the people brought to the fore were the crooks and the thugs and the sycophants. Can you imagine a situation where you have Sagala Ratnayaka, Minister of Law and Order? He's a sweet child. But Iran, Harsha, not given cabinet ministries. It's absolute nonsense, isn't it? There's no merit in this system. What is wrong?
So, tell me, where's the international community in all this?
The international community, as usual, is playing its own game, and I've written a piece about it for a series I will start called The March of Folly, where they don't actually understand that by continuing to prop up Ranil Wickremesinghe, they are actually, laying the groundwork for a very anti-Western regime to emerge.
You see,
it's very much like we told them way back in 2010 when they were persecuting Mahinda Rajapaksa. I said, why are you doing this? Because a little bit of understanding of the great job he did in destroying terrorism would have actually meant Sri Lanka positioning itself as it should be in the very middle. Unfortunately, the vicious way the West behaved because of Hillary Clinton, she was very different from George Bush in that. So I hope Trump at least has some sense. But that actually made Mahinda and the extremists in his party move in a way they wouldn't have. And I remember telling Mahinda Rajapaksa, why don't you do a few moderate steps and we'll get rid of this pressure? He said to me very sadly, he said, whatever I do, they will hate me. And I think he was right, because people like Miliband and Hillary Clinton were absolutely vicious. But of course, the mistake they then made was when Cameron was elected, they didn't appoint a new High Commissioner straight away. I think because there were elements in the Foreign Ministry who were actually destructive of Sri Lanka. Not GL, who was a cipher, but other people. And the result was that Cameron was then taken over by the terrorist diaspora. Just as now, after they had put all their eggs in the Hillary Clinton basket, the terrorist diaspora has promptly created Tamils for Trump and are busy now bum-sucking him. Whereas I don't think we have got the people, we don't have, very good people like Diane in a position in New York or Geneva who could actually win over people. Diane in Geneva had the Americans, of course it was under George Bush, much more sympathetic than the Europeans in those days. And it was only because they got rid of Diane rather foolishly that the Americans and the Brits were able to do their wicked way, have their wicked way with the Human Rights Council.
Thank you for that analysis, Professor Vijayasinghe, and we appreciate you coming in on Newsline. Now then, I want to try and leave with a sort of a happier tone. Do you think that Mrs. Deepa Senimiratne, the former superintendent of the Public Debt Department, Central Bank of Sri Lanka, whose image will probably appear on the screen now, do you think that we need to acknowledge her and get a movement going so that she can be given some sort of the highest civilian honor?
I think you absolutely must. Obviously, it would be inappropriate while the inquiry is ongoing. But I think there must be a move to say that honest public servants like that who have suffered are suitably rewarded. You see, one of the problems with this government is conducting a witch hunt against very good public servants like Mr. Ranawaka, who's an excellent secretary. He's being persecuted, but I think that's wrong. But even worse is the fact that there is no recognition of the good
Wonderful. On that note, that's it from Newsline this morning. Professor Vijay Singh, thank you very much for your presence.
Thank you.
And for our listeners who may be driving to work soon after this, if you listen to Talk of the Town at 7:55, you may find it rather interesting and invigorating. In the meantime, thank you, and we'll see you here, same time, same place, tomorrow morning, helping you to stay connected. Take care, have a great day, and God bless.